Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into a transmission that literally defied time itself. You see, the first distress signal arrived from a region of space that had been considered officially dead for, well, nearly 10 years. And according to every navigational archive, military record, and surviving star chart out there, Fleet 17 had vanished, poof, without leaving behind a single wreck, a survivor, or even a warp beacon. I mean, entire generations of historians agreed on one solid conclusion. The fleet was gone forever. But then one impossible transmission shattered all that certainty. The message was just 6 words long: mission complete. Permission to dock requested. Just 6 words, and yet it heralded the arrival of this colossal fleet just tearing through a violent dimensional storm. Every single vessel bore these heavy battle scars that looked, centuries old. But here's the crazy part. Every identification beacon perfectly matched records that were lost 10 millennia earlier. This transmission should have been absolutely impossible. But what investigators eventually discovered aboard those ships, well, it would force an empire to erase the truth from history itself. So to give you some context, long before the empire reached its current age of stagnation, humanity was actually standing on the edge of this great expansion. Thousands of new colonies had just been founded. Supply routes were stretching out across completely unexplored sectors. And honestly, optimism still far outweighed fear. Fleet 17 represented the absolute finest example of that golden era. You gotta understand, this wasn't just some standard military deployment. It's better to think of it as an entire civilization in motion. We're talking hundreds of escort vessels protecting these immense carrier ships, all packed with engineers, scientists, diplomats, colonial administrators, and literally millions of civilians destined to establish new worlds out beyond the frontier. In fact, military analysts later estimated that no expedition before or since has ever carried such a massive concentration of knowledge, industry, and experienced personnel. So when they disappeared, it nearly crippled all frontier expansion. The official reports of the time blamed it on a catastrophic navigation failure inside some unstable dimensional currents. And recovery fleets, they searched for decades, but they found absolutely nothing. No debris, no escape pods, no distress signals. It was literally as if the entire expedition had just been wiped from reality. For 10 years, this mystery just sat there, completely unsolved. Then all of a sudden, everything changed. Deep inside the Perseus expanse, these automated listening stations started detecting synchronized engine signatures, and not just a few dozen, okay, hundreds of them. The pattern matched Fleet 17 exactly. Now, of course, military command immediately assumed this was some kind of hostile impersonation. Entire defense fleets mobilized in a panic, orbital fortresses started prepping their firing solutions, and civilian traffic was completely cleared out of the surrounding systems. But right away, something just didn't make sense. This unidentified fleet made zero attempt to conceal itself. As we can see on this tactical breakdown, every single maneuver they made complied with military doctrine that had been abandoned thousands of years earlier. They were following ancient navigation corridors that, literally, no modern captain would ever use today. Every transmission they sent used totally obsolete encryption protocols, and every single identification code matched the historical archives with perfect accuracy. Basically, the fleet was behaving exactly as Fleet 17 would have, as if no time had passed at all. So when the interception forces finally established visual contact, well, experienced admirals reportedly just fell silent. The ships looked incredibly ancient, yet they were fully operational. Their armor plates carried thousands of battle repairs, and the weapon systems had clearly seen extensive heavy combat. Entire sections of these ships had actually been rebuilt using engineering techniques that are completely unknown to modern industry. But despite all that, the fleet remained active, perfectly disciplined, perfectly organized, and still, incredibly, just patiently awaiting docking permission. I mean, just imagine being on that boarding team for a second. You step on board expecting to find, I don't know, terrified survivors or maybe even a ghost ship. But instead, you find the crews calmly performing routine maintenance. Mess halls are serving up fresh meals. Medical bays are just treating ordinary day-to-day injuries. Bridge officers are right there continuing to update their navigation logs. Nobody on board believed anything unusual had happened. To them, only a few months had passed since their departure. And the medical examinations produced an even wilder contradiction. Look at this timeline here. It highlights the impossible discrepancy. The crew members possessed biological ages that perfectly matched the official departure records. Many of the officers who realistically should have died nearly 10 years earlier, they appeared to be 30, 40, maybe 50 years old. They weren't immortal or anything. They were just completely untouched by history. Of course, scientists immediately started proposing relativistic anomalies, while others blamed unknown dimensional physics. But honestly, none of our modern physics could actually explain this, and not a single one of those early explanations survived further investigation. That's because the real answer lay entirely within their recovered command journals. And wow, those records described a journey that really should never have been possible. As the journals revealed, they weren't exactly lost. They were trapped. The dimensional corridor they originally entered just collapsed right behind them, sealing off every single exit. Navigation failed. Communication vanished. Resupply became completely impossible. Returning home just wasn't an option anymore. The entire expedition was suddenly facing extinction. Their supplies dwindled, fuel reserves shrank, replacement parts disappeared, and as you can probably imagine, morale completely collapsed. So right as they're facing total extinction, something totally unexpected appears. Not an enemy ship, not an ally, but an opening, a corridor leading even deeper into uncharted dimensional space. Now, this decision completely divided the command council. One faction demanded they remain stationary and just wait until a rescue party arrived. But another argued that rescue was never going to come. And you know, history kind of suggests both groups were partially correct. Ultimately, Fleet 17 decided to advance. And what they found beyond that corridor, it transformed them forever. It was frankly staggering. Their journals describe these totally silent star systems, completely untouched by civilization. They found artificial megastructures orbiting dead suns, entire worlds covered by abandoned cities that were literally larger than continents. And the crazy thing is, power was still flowing through machines whose creators had vanished millions of years earlier, but they never found any bodies, no records explaining the disappearance. Just millions of years of absolute eerie silence. Over time, obviously, their whole mindset had to shift. The fleet began harvesting this ancient technology carefully, not as conquerors, mind you, but as survivors. Their engineers somehow adapted these unfamiliar energy systems. The shipyards completely reconstructed their damaged cruisers. The agricultural vessels eventually became fully self-sustaining, and their factories evolved way beyond their original specifications. So slowly but surely, Fleet 17 stopped acting like a lost expedition and started acting like a full-blown civilization. Children were born, and the veterans trained a whole new generation of officers. As the years passed, their languages shifted and new traditions evolved. Entire generations actually lived and died believing that the old empire existed only in legends and stories. Yet despite all that time, One single law always bound them together: return home. Every resource they gathered served that one objective. Every scientific breakthrough they made pursued that single goal: finding the path back. Now, just think about how easily isolated societies tend to fracture and fall apart. Military historians often overlook the greatest weapon Fleet 17 actually possessed. It wasn't their firepower, it was their discipline. Miraculously, their central command authority survived across centuries. Their supply chains adapted instead of just collapsing. All the civilian industries remained under strict centralized coordination, and mutiny, it remained remarkably rare. Despite an isolation that lasted what should have been an eternity, the fleet never once fragmented into competing states. Honestly, that achievement alone borders on the miraculous. But then the attacks began. The recovered combat footage is actually still heavily censored today, and it's not because of graphic violence, but because analysts literally couldn't identify the attackers. The ship's sensors would just fail whenever they appeared. Visual recordings would severely distort, and entire formations would just vanish between frames. The journals simply refer to them as the Watchers, these entities with no known origin, no language, and no demands, just relentless assaults against the fleet's navigation vessels. Each battle forced Fleet 17 to abandon yet another potential route home. Losses mounted quickly. The factories had to shift entirely toward war production, and exploration completely ceased. From that point on, survival became everything. Yet here's the really weird part. Despite centuries of conflict, the Watchers never actually attempted total destruction. It was almost as if they just wanted the fleet contained in that space, which raises a pretty chilling question. Were these creatures defending something? Or were they deliberately trying to stop humanity from returning home with all this forbidden knowledge? Unfortunately, the official archives have never given us an answer. Eventually, though, Fleet 17 managed to discover another dimensional fracture. It was much smaller, highly unstable, and quite possibly just temporary. When they found it, the Council was faced with a massive choice: stay in that dimension and fight forever, or risk total annihilation trying to cross it. The vote was completely unanimous. They were going home, but the real tragedy is that what they emerged into wasn't the empire they remembered at all. Their home sectors had changed completely beyond recognition. The very constellations in the sky differed. Political borders had vanished, and entire civilizations had risen and fallen while they were gone. Even the languages now required translation, and new religious beliefs had formed around technologies that the fleet considered to be just ordinary engineering. So to Fleet 17, their homeland had basically become an alien world. And to the Empire, well, Fleet 17 were just ghosts returning from the dead. And let me tell you, the Empire's reaction to this return wasn't exactly a celebration. It was sheer panic. Military command stepped in and immediately quarantined every single vessel. You had scientists scrambling to catalog all these unfamiliar technologies, historians frantically copying millions of recovered documents, and intelligence agencies swooping in to seize the navigation records before anyone else could even study them. Because one terrifying question overshadowed absolutely everything. If Fleet 17 found a route back, could someone or something else use that route as well? They quickly dispatched surveillance probes toward the fleet's re-entry coordinates, but they only found empty space. There was no corridor, no dimensional instability, nothing at all. That is, until one single probe transmitted a highly corrupted image right before it disappeared. When they did a frame-by-frame enhancement of that image, it revealed these faint silhouettes surrounding the sensor package, watching, waiting, exactly as they were described in Fleet 17's journals. So within months, every public reference to Fleet 17's return completely disappeared. Official history just reverted back to the original story. They were lost during exploration and never recovered. The surviving crew members had to accept classified reassignments under permanent oaths of secrecy. The recovered technologies quietly entered military research under totally different project names, and entire historical archives vanished behind the highest possible security clearances. But you have to ask, why erase the greatest survival story in human history? Was it just a fear of societal panic, or did the leaders realize that if Fleet 17 could find a way back in, something else could definitely follow them? There's one final detail. The very last recovered log was actually recorded just minutes before Fleet 17 emerged from that dimensional storm. In it, the fleet's aging commander looks directly into the camera and speaks with this remarkable calm. He says, "If this recording reaches home before we do, destroy every chart we've sent. Forget the route, forget our discoveries. If they know where humanity lives, then this voyage was never a rescue." And then the recording just ends abruptly. No further explanation follows. No official inquiry ever addressed those final words. Now, perhaps the commander had finally succumbed to paranoia after centuries of isolation. Or just maybe he understood something that every investigator later chose to hide. Because you see, history often remembers the return of lost explorers as a great triumph, but sometimes the greatest danger isn't actually getting lost out there. It's leading something back with you. So I'm gonna leave you with this thought. Did Fleet 17 pull off the greatest survival and rescue mission in human history? Or did they just open a door that really should have remained sealed?